Very confident, which sets him up in good shape when he's playing the world's best. And, OK, we have a first move. Queen's pawns have both moved forward. And, OK, will we see, I was going to say the Jobava London system, will the bishop develop itself out, the dark spike bishop? Yeah.
Yeah, Hans Niemann did a chessable course on this opening recently.
Yeah, he did. He's also a big favourite of Simon Williams.
Aha, the Jobava London, that's true actually. Hans Niemann, he has a chessable course on this opening. When will we see if it is the Jobava London?
I think if White develops his dark squared bishop now, if he develops it as he has just done, this is the Jobava London system. It's technically slightly different because Black's knight is normally developed out instead of his bishop. I think Aronian maybe has studied Niemann's chessable course. Maybe he knew this opening was coming, so he tried to avoid it. But either way, this setup for White with the queenside knight out on this square, with the queenside bishop out on this square, that is the Jobava London system. And it's very rare, actually, because until this last move, White had developed the queenside pieces, but not the kingside pieces. Normally in chess, we see the vice versa. We see the other way around. The kingside pieces develop out so that the White king can castle. And Hans, he's made up for that now by bringing his knight out. White's king is ready to shuffle across to safety. And it's very solid from both sides so far. No real tension with the pawns. That's, again, quite rare for such an opening, especially a queen's pawn opening. And I've got to give credit to Hans because he did a chessable course on the opening. And some people, they create courses, they write opening books, but they don't practice what they preach. Hans has been playing it against the top players over the board, online. He's really testing out this opening, trying to make it into a fearsome weapon.
And I remember from Chessable Masters when we talked a lot about openings. The rule was kind of find out what kind of style you have and then dig into the openings that fit that style. So what kind of players should study Hans Niemann's Jobava London course that is on Chessable?
Yeah, I think the beauty of the Jobava London system is, firstly, there's not actually so much opening theory. There's not much that you have to sit there and memorize. It's more just about feel. All you need is, need to know the first three moves. From there, it's just about general plans. You can freestyle where do the pawns go, which pawns to push, where do the pieces belong. Sometimes you've got to make a decision which side to castle. Here, he's castled on the king side. Often, you actually end up castling on the other flank. So it's players who like flexibility. It's players who don't want to get too deep into the kind of the academic side of chess, where you just have to memorize, you have to note down all the moves, work out all the variations. At the end, it turns out to be a draw. Nope, there's no forcing draw variations in this one. And also, Fighting Chess Index, we talked about, it's for fighting players. And I think that's why it's so popular, that specific opening at amateur levels, at tournament player, club player levels, and all the way up to grandmaster level, clearly.
Wow. Yeah, one of the benefits of studying an opening like this is that a lot of people just don't have the time to dedicate themselves to studying all these mainline openings, which have like 20 moves of theory or something, and they're very cutting edge. And so they said, no, we don't want that. So we're going to scratch that and play something that we can learn and master in a short space of time. And as David says, it's flexible. And the big thing that I would say is just know where your pieces are going to go, know what's your typical pawn breaks, and you should be fine. In fact, it's a good rule of thumb for every single opening. Know where your pieces go, know which ones are the sharp lines, dedicate some time and energy to fixing that, and then play.
Wow.
With confidence.
And there are different types of openings. I mean, one of your favourites, Jovanka, the Caro Khan, that one, in some variations, you have to know 20 moves of theory. You have to memorise 25 moves deep just to get a playable position. The Jobava London system, you know 3 moves, and you're OK. And then from there, you might not get an opening advantage, you might not win quickly, but you get a good position full of potential. So it's a stylistic thing. And we should mention 3 of the most famous grandmasters who play the opening on a regular basis, Hans Niemann, Jobava himself, and Simon Williams. They're all very attacking players. They're all very creative. So it allows that. The flexibility gives room for creativity.
OK, so if you do like attacking, if you want a flexible opening, and if you don't want to spend too much time going 20 moves deep, if 3 moves is good for you, then the Jobava London is the perfect opening for you, and you can study it with Hans Niemann on Chessable. I think that sounds like the opening for me.
Yeah, I think so, Kaya.
I think so too. Just something where you have a setup where you know where the pieces go, and you know your way to attack. It's important, and you're off.
And Kaya, I've beaten Garry Kasparov with the Jobava London system. It was only a blitz game, but still, I managed to beat him twice, actually, with the opening.
You've beaten Garry Kasparov?
Only in blitz, but
That's not told me.
It was kind of practice-friendly games, and he got really annoyed, actually, when I started playing the opening. He was like, don't you want to learn some proper openings? But, yeah, eventually he figured it out, and then he beat me in the third time, but still.
Oh, wow, that's how cool. Well, talking about... Yeah, sorry, David.
It works best against players who rely a lot on opening preparation, and Garry Kasparov does do that. So.
Well, Garry Kasparov, even he lost to David. Wow, very cool, David. But he is a great champion in history, and we are asking about this today. Who do you hold as the biggest champion in chess history?
Yeah.
Has anyone answered Garry Kasparov?
Yeah, we have actually.
Yeah.
It's like you read my my spreadsheet in front of me, and yeah, Shokan says that for them, the best chess champion is Kasparov. He was competing with Karpov during the big changes in the Soviet Union and the whole world. And for many people, he's not only a talented chess player, but an agent of change. He is still a fighter for democracy and freedom.
Meanwhile, sorry there, Jovanka, but we have seen Hans Niemann. I think he was cursing himself a moment ago. He was talking to himself.
Oh, look at that.
Slapping his face. He has just blundered a pawn. We were praising the Jobava London system, and the opening actually worked out very well for White until just 2 moves ago, or 3 moves ago, when he made a miscalculation. And look how much he's suffering now. Look how much kind of frustration there is in his face. And we have to show what just happened. It actually stemmed from 3 moves ago. If we backtrack to this position, White has a very healthy position here. White can play a whole bunch of moves. White can push a pawn to kick back the black bishop. This is part of the flexibility we were talking about. White can capture a pawn in the center. White can, for example, create a pin on this diagonal. Lots of moves here. Hans, I think, relaxed a bit too early. He brought his knight forward. But after a forced series of moves, a trade, another trade, and a capture here, he forgot that after pawn takes pawn, the white bishop cannot go and recapture this pawn now. White would have an advantage if it wasn't for this one move. Black's pawn pushing forward, hitting this bishop, and wherever the bishop goes next move, whoops, suddenly the other bishop is trapped. This bishop now is doomed. It's trapped by a pawn, and Black wins material. So that's why we saw Hans just slapping his face, talking to himself, frustrated. But fair play to him, he's battled on. And if we catch up to the current game position, we saw that White couldn't take this pawn earlier. Instead, he's just had to ignore it. And Black, therefore, has had the opportunity to start pushing pawns himself. And this threat is still in the air. This pawn push is really scary to deal with. And I think Hans needs to try and fight against this kind of pawn wedge that Black has got going in the centre. Indeed, he pushes forward this pawn. At least now, after this pawn push, which Aronian plays instantly, at least White now can counterattack against the Black knight. And I'm really shocked that Aronian is playing so quickly. Why? He could have paused. Maybe he had stronger moves. But in the end, after taking this bishop, now Hans has to decide, does he trade off a set of rooks first? Or does he go and recapture this Black knight? Black will still be a pawn up in most scenarios, but at least Hans is not dead yet. He still has fighting chances. And as we see there, just a rook trade, the Black knight disappears, and after a trade of pawns as well, this capture, I think White needs to break his bishop out of prison. As soon as possible, he needs to push this pawn forward to break down Black's pawn in the centre. One thing you can't do as White is step back with your king, because actually this pawn push would be a very famous kind of scenario with the white bishop trapped, entombed. It looks like it's on a nice diagonal, but it can never break through this pawn in the centre. And this pawn structure was made famous by former world champion Capablanca, just on the other side of the board. So, yeah, a dead piece if Hans can't break it out.
Yeah. And he is going for it, absolutely needed to do it. I mean, it's such an important move that even if it cost him an extra pawn or something, it had to happen. Yeah. You don't want to be playing with a trapped piece. And, OK, but now there are consequences because the white king, well, it's sitting there exposed on an open diagonal. So the first move to calculate would be what happens if the black queen just dives in, gives a check.
Yeah, gives a check. For example, white can block with a pawn. And then I guess you could make an argument for taking this guy in the centre. But at least now white, after a pawn exchange, can swing the white rook across. And this bishop is going to break out. We mentioned it needs to get back in the game. Next move, once the black queen retreats somewhere safe, the white bishop will capture a pawn in the centre. White's king still exposed, but he'll only be a pawn down. So Aronian decided, I mean, maybe this was good for black, but Aronian decided in the end to just gain time against the white queen. And the white queen moved, the black queen leapt forward as well. And I'm slightly surprised, why is Aronian playing so quickly? He's won a pawn, he's done half the hard work, but accuracy is still required in positions like this. Black's advantage is still decent, but maybe it could have been bigger. I'm really worried about this pawn being a long-term weakness now for black. And the white bishop has hopes long-term of winning this pawn. What do you think, Ivanka?
I agree with you. I'm just really shocked at how quickly he's playing. I mean, you said it before, and I'll say it again. He has like just under 15 minutes, all the time in the world to sit there and consider whether he should play with this pawn, and instead he's just playing on instincts. And I think at this level, it's too much to ask.
Yeah. I mean, suddenly you see Hans Niemann now compare it to 5 minutes ago, where he was just distraught. He was devastated. He knew that he had a losing position. He blundered a pawn. Suddenly, Hans has hope. And it just feels to me as if Aronian, it's not been going his way, the tournament so far. We talked about this phenomenon of being tired and playing extra quick just to compensate for that, to try and get the game over and done with as quickly as possible. It feels to me like Aronian, despite his pawn advantage in the current position, he's just rushing a bit too much. I think he could have wrapped up this game, won it already, if he just paused a few moments ago. I mean, that's not to say he should have done the extreme and made the mistake I make of getting in time pressure and spending too long and being indecisive. Being decisive is good, but having 15 minutes left on the clock, we're nearing the endgame. It's unnecessary. You need to invest that time a bit earlier on.
Yeah, definitely. And, well, now it's Hans Niemann's turn to burn some time, and he's doing some right things. He's thinking about what's his target, and he's decided to swap off queens. Again, unexpected. I thought that he would keep the queens on and pile on pressure on the pawn. And
I have no idea what's happening here, guys, because I criticised Aronian for rushing, and now Hans, he barely spent any time. He spent like a minute and then swapped off queens, which is one of the biggest decisions in chess. He's swapped off queens. He's ruined his own pawn structure, given black a beautiful knight. Maybe it was a good decision, but you can't make it in 1 minute.
Well, also, the white king is in danger, right?
This pawn structure is terrible for white. Not only are you a pawn down, but yeah, you could get checkmated. And OK, the white king is marching up the board, but just to show your point, Ivanka, there are checkmating ideas on the board. For example, if you go back with your king, whoops, the rook is just going to come round and trap you, checkmate you. This is a very common pattern with a rook and a knight, trapping a white king. Even if you don't step back with the white king right now, where are you going? If you step forward, the black king will just step forward as well. I don't even know what you do with white here. Say you move your rook, you just get checked. Maybe the black rook just enters the position as well. What is white even doing? The problem is, if you ever try to get active, if you ever try to open the position up for your bishop, as we advocated earlier on, then you just get left with an even weaker pawn in the centre of the board. This pawn is a potential weakness. I could see ideas such as the black knight jumping in and trying to checkmate you. This is actually a checkmate threat on the board. And look at this, Aronian, he's going for a similar idea. He's just completely ignored his central pawn because he knows that if it's captured, he can just march his king forward. This white king is actually in a mating net. How are you going to get it out? For example, if you push, this is a check, very simple check. And again, exact same pattern, coming behind and checkmating. I think this game's going to be a miniature. I think this one's going to be over in a few more moves.
Whoa. Yeah. What is a miniature game?
Just a quick one. Normally, a short one.
Exactly.
Normally, a miniature is, I think it's supposed to be under 20 moves, but this one is just, I mean, under 20 minutes.
Yeah, 14 minutes. Wow. Hans Niemann, what is he doing?
It just reminds me of, I have to be honest here, junior chess, you know, at the low levels when you start playing and, you know, everyone's just playing very, very quickly. And I remember my father used to spend a lot of time telling me off and saying, don't play so quickly. And I tried to cheat him, tried to like just rub out most of my moves. And he was like, what is this? You finished in 20 minutes and you played 60 moves. And well, anyway, we're seeing something similar here. It's now 32 moves and Hans Niemann, his position is just dire. The white king is in big trouble.
Yeah. White king is in big trouble. All of white's pawns are weak. Black's rook is about to come down into the white position. First, he knocks back the white king with a check, gaining even more time and space. I mean, they're not even thinking. Aronian is 34 moves in. He got surprised on move 3, and he's got more time than he started with on the clock. It feels like a blitz game, but with rapid time control with 15 minutes. I mean, this could well be a game that both players had 1 minute on the clock, like a bullet game.
Yeah.
The quality, these two, they're both fantastic players, but the quality has not been too high either.
Yeah. Often this kind of happens when your adrenaline is pumping a little bit too much and you can't calm yourself down and you end up playing so fast.
Yeah.
And here we go.
But yeah, I mean, earlier I was surprised Aronian was playing so quickly. Ever since that moment, he's actually played really, really well. But Hans Niemann, when you're on the defensive, rule 101, stop and think, slow down the pace of the game, find your bearings again. Yes, he blundered earlier, but he only blundered a pawn. There was still chances. Actually, his position improved after he blundered a pawn quite significantly. And look at Hans now. He's not even focused. He's looking away. Is he about to resign?
It looks like it.
It looks like something's just off. The focus isn't there. Well, OK, now he's coming back, but the moves, they're just continuing every second. Just you can barely pause. The rook was attacking the bishop. Now,
Ba-bam, and again.
I mean, what are they doing? I mean, I want to sit here and enjoy the moment, explain a few things. I want to calculate myself to figure out what's going on, but they're not letting us.
What is this? What is the, are they experimenting?
No, I mean, if you saw this on an over the board game, they would just be banging the clock, playing instantly, bang, 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 and yeah, everyone would be crowding round.
I mean, 38 moves, and Levon has more than 15 minutes on the clock.
Yeah.
That's the strangest thing.
The only time I remember such a thing happening on the tour previously was Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. I think he played against Timur Radjabov, and it was like move 40. It was a dead-drawn rook endgame. He had, I think, 17, 18 minutes. He'd gained that much time, and then he blundered. So sooner or later, we might see a big mistake from one of them. Levon Aronian, though, he's tried to do some calculation there. Now he's leaning back in his chair. Is that relaxation? Is that knowing he's done the hard work? There is a trick in the position, and a very crafty trick, actually. I'm not sure whether he calculated this one in advance or just saw it kind of spur of the moment, but now we have to jump in because knights are so tricky. If rook takes pawn, looks like white is starting to fight back, getting back into the game, winning a pawn back, maybe creating some checks, but this would be met by a cold shower, the knight dropping back, hitting the rook, hitting the bishop. That's a fork, and the bishop isn't actually protected because of a pin along this third rank. So, for example, after the rook moves across, trade, and white's pawns all fall like dominoes. These two pawns will win the game. Next move, this one dropping as well. Instead, Hans had to find another solution. He moved his bishop.
And now I'm expecting Levon to take a pause. Nope, he didn't take a pause. I was expecting, him just to calm down. This is his fallback option, just protect the pawn. But it's also possible to jump forward with the knight. And Levon just simple chess, defends the pawn. And OK, is there any hope for Hans Niemann to save this? Difficult. Difficult rook and pawn ending, because white's pawn structure is just terrible. None of the pawns are connected. They're all weak. And Levon has just perfect pawn structure, especially on the right. He has the golden type of pawn, which is a passed pawn, and a protected passed pawn at that.
All right. Well, Hans he's ticked under 10 minutes on the clock now, but he's definitely not looking happy. The young American. He started with a Jobava London, his favorite opening, but it hasn't gone his way this game.
Yeah, it was just that one blunder, and we always talk about mistakes being natural. They're a part of chess. Everyone makes them, but recovery, that's the key. And I think that one does come with experience. So 19 years old.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's decent at recovery in general, but this game, he's been lacking.
Yeah.
That was his downfall.
Yeah, and he will have the whole afternoon, maybe even evening, to think about what's gone wrong. I really liked Sam Sevian's way of coping with this kind of tournament, because you get enormous pressure from playing such of these games. And even if you're doing well or doing badly, you still get the adrenaline rush, and you still get that rush of emotions. And I liked what he said. He just took a walk, and then he just chilled a little bit and then to work. And what was quite noticeable was that he changed his schedule. We also heard Pragnanda in last month's May's tournament, that he also changed his schedule so that he would be training and playing late at night and in the early morning.
And mentioning Pragnanda, in that Oslo tournament, didn't he have a performance rating of 3,000? Close to 3,000? Was it 3,000?
I think around there after the first few days. I mean, it was just incredible. He was winning all his matches in 3 games. It was best of 4. He would always win in advance. And I mean, that if he'd been able to keep it up, that would have been maybe the best tournament performance in history against such elite opposition. But obviously it's hard after kind of a prolonged event to maintain that kind of astronomical level of that win rate.
But maybe we could see it again, because Sam Sevian, he's won 4 games in a row, and his performance rating is now 3,000.
Oh.
Yeah, Sam Sevian. He is not playing this round because it's a walkover win against Timur Jabov, but the 3,000 was before this game. So, I mean, if he keeps winning.
Wow.
Very impressive.
I think he's got 20 points after this round out of a possible 24. I mean, I don't think we've seen it at this stage.
Yeah.
Even the likes of Magnus Carlsen have struggled to hit those heights. Normally there's a few more draws along the way.
Yeah.
Or a defeat here or there. Not yet for Sam Sevian.
And he's met many of the higher-rated players. He beat Levon Aronian. So these youngsters, wow, they are playing some impressive chess. Hans Niemann struggling a little bit, and definitely in this game. Do you still think it's going to be a quick game, or will they keep fighting?
He's drawing it out, Hans Niemann. But if you look, OK, this last pawn has dropped, but Black does have 2 passed pawns now, the H pawn and the B pawn. More importantly, a 2-pawn advantage. Look at the white king as well. Dancing into some very weird squares. And look at this. Checkmate is about to happen. Look at Hans Niemann. He reacted as if it's a surprise that he's losing this game, but checkmate's coming. The black rook is just going to swing the whole way across behind the white king, and this stuff can happen if you rush, if you don't think.
Yeah, and there we saw him cursing and expecting the game to be finished any second now. OK, so he's just pushed a pawn forward. Well, that's not going to help matters. It's just delaying the inevitable. And there you go. We have a result. Levon Aronian wins.
And it's over. Hans Niemann loses to Levon Aronian.